Happy Thursday, everybody. And when I say happy, I mean like really happy, because we are going to get happy here with my good friend Carin, who is a happiness guru. And we are going to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about passion. We're going to talk about steps to find your purpose. So before we dive into it all, first, I want to welcome Carin.
Hi, Jen. So good to be here.
So great to be here with you, and your energy is just booming on International Women's Day.
I know. What a great day to be here. It's like so perfect that you and I would get to do this on today of all days.
I know. It's funny. I thought to myself this morning, did you do that on purpose?
Yes, everything's on purpose. Everything. I love it.
Intentional living. That's right. So Carin and I met many years ago in New York. We were both speaking for an event. I think it was for Morgan Stanley, if I remember correctly. And I just fell in love with her. Her energy, her excitement for life. She had been I think you had just got done your degree, or you're working on finishing your degree. She had finished a master's in positive psychology, which all of you know I am all about, from Penn. And so she's a smarty pants. And for those of you who don't know, that's where the program of positive psychology began. And it is their top program year after year after year. And we were both speaking about living to your potential and seizing the best life possible. So we talk about very similar topics. And needless to say, when we are together, whether professionally or personally, we can just banter all day long because of this topic and become philosophical about life. So Carin, just so you guys know, also speaks at Fortune 500 companies all over the world. And she is launching her Purpose Girl podcast in just a few weeks. Yay! So we're going to have to keep you all up to date as to when exactly, do you have an exact date for that, Carin?
I don't. We're just putting the finishing touches on the editing now. So
Okay.
I will let you know as soon as I have it.
Okay, great. And there is a website that they can go to sign up now to get updates and newsletters, so that as soon as it launches, they can find out, right?
Yeah, if you go to purposegirl.com, you can sign up there. It'll actually get a Living on Purpose guide, which will help throughout our conversation today. And then afterwards you'll get that for free, and you'll be able to go through your own purpose.
Awesome. So I want to give a shout out to Nakia and Lauren and Rich, who are all watching, and also saying happy International Women's Day. It's a big day. I love all the love that goes around on these special days. I wish that would happen every day. I mean, there's no reason that it couldn't happen every day. Some people might say, well, it's not as special if it happens every day, but I disagree with that.
No, it would actually make it more special, right? Like, special doesn't have to be it's totally unique and only on this one day. I mean, special means that that there's something sacred there. Yeah. And if every day we're actually connecting and we're smiling at each other. I mean, I saw what you put on Instagram this morning, and I totally loved it, right? That the way that we can actually change the world is decide that we're going to be grateful instead of complaining, and decide that we're going to smile at everyone we meet, even if they don't smile back. I loved it. And the world would be exactly what it's supposed to be if we actually did that.
You know, it's funny, going back to that thought process. I have a girlfriend who said to me one day, and I think this thought process is ingrained when we're little girls. And she said to me, I don't feel as special of your best friend because you love so many people and you have so many friends. And I was like, that is the craziest, most scarcely minded thing I think I've ever heard you say. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, this is all ingrained when we're in kindergarten, first grade, and everybody starts saying, so who's your best friend? And people start to feel like they have to have just one choice, or maybe two best friends, but you can't have more than that. And when people will say to me, like, who's your, top mentor? Or maybe even if they said, who's your best friend? I have so many best friends because I love them for their own individual, unique thing. I don't have to pick one over the other. Or I love the beach for many reasons. I love the morning on the beach as much as I love the evening on the beach. And I think we really need to get into this more abundant mindset where we can appreciate a lot of layers of different people, things, and experiences. And it doesn't have to just being this exclusive, I have one best friend, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean it should not eradicate the appreciation of everything else. And I just think that we're eliminating so much appreciation out of our lives by thinking that way, instead of finding the greatness in all of our different friends for the uniqueness that they are.
Right. But I actually was one of those girls that I was afraid when I was in fourth grade and my one best friend had another best friend. I mean, my own fear kicked in that I was going to be on the outs. And so, it's so interesting bringing it back to International Women's Day. I was reading a string, on someone else's International Women's Day post today about how women are so mean, and, even in corporate, they'd rather work with men. And I don't actually think that that's our natural state. I think that that was something that we were afraid of when we were young girls. Yeah. And the only way that maybe we knew how, or that we learned how, was just to kind of fight with each other. But that's not our natural state. I mean, I think our natural state is actually to connect and to support each other.
Yeah. So it goes back to what I think I mentioned earlier about how adults would say, well, who's your best friend? And it would program these beliefs like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to just pick one person or two people. I can't have multiple best friends or good friends. I want to ask you a question about that. I love your transparency in calling yourself out of, I was one of those girls. What happened when you did that, when you got fear-based, and what happened to your relationship?
Yeah, so I had switched schools between third grade and fourth grade, and had this best friend, Patty Brown. Patty, wherever you are, hello. And she had another best friend, Missy Swan. And I did not make these names up. These are their real names. And I became so afraid that I actually said something horribly mean to Missy. And it's so interesting that I still remember it. It's how many, decades later, and I still remember it. And I really ended up losing both of them as friends. Right. And I really feel like, I was just saying this on the radio maybe a year or so ago. I gave a public shout out and apology to Missy on the radio, because I'm like, in part, I feel like part of the work that I do in empowering women to know who you are and love themselves and finally be happier and live their purpose is like in honor of Missy back then, in honor of me having been based in fear before, and that's not who I want to be, And so it's like, I want to treat every woman now like she is awesome and beautiful and capable, and that we're all in this together.
The biggest lesson of that I want everyone to hear loud and clear is her fear, and this is a universal thing that happens, but I'm so grateful of Carin giving her story as an example for everyone to learn from, is her fear. It's kind of like squeezing the death out of something, like it's just squeezing the life out of it, squeezing the life out of it to bring it to death. When we get into that state of fear, what we fear, we actually create. So you actually created the demise of those friendships out of the fear of the demise, instead of being able at that place and space of your life to see abundance, to see the love of your friendships, and that it didn't have to be just one friend or the other, that all of you could have fun together. And I try and teach my girls this. They're at, such a delicate age, 13, almost 14, 8th grade. We all remember it. And I try to tell them about that abundance mindset. And I also try to tell them, a lot of your friends that are friends now, you're going to keep evolving and transforming, and they're not going to be necessarily there in college and beyond college. And I have one best friend since I was in since I was in grade school and kindergarten, and then I have a couple from high school. But all the people that I was friends with still hold a special place of my transformation of my life, but they're not necessarily in my everyday life. And I think the biggest takeaway of that whole thing is that fear-based scarcity mindset is not empowering, which is probably a part of why you teach what you teach now. Right. And it actually causes the fear that you fear the most.
I mean, totally. And the other thing I would say is, so obviously now as an adult, I've studied happiness and I teach happiness, specifically the science. And we know that, adult women, especially as we're in that middle age range, are actually, so women on our own, we're twice as likely to be depressed as men. And not just that, but we are more depressed statistically than women were 30 years ago. And
it's crazy because we know more about how to access happiness.
Exactly. We know more about how to access happiness, and we have more opportunity than the women did 30 years ago, right? It's like we can have it all, and that is part of what's making us miserable. But another part that's actually, there are proven reasons why we are more depressed, and most of them have a very fixable solution using emotional intelligence, using positive psychology. And one of them is that as we get older, we actually cut off our relationships with friends. And so research shows that we need, really close relationships in order to be happier in life, and end up feeling like we don't have time for it anymore. And so, it's like another lesson from that is, as adults, we have to be making time for those relationships.
Well, I think those fears kind of still creep into that whole theory or thesis, right? Or also this ego-centric belief systems that have been passed on from parents to children and create cycles of, someone does something to you and you just cut them out of your life forever. I mean, with emotional intelligence, we talk about this all the time. Like, that's not how to handle conflict. That's not how to mature relationships. That's not how to have healthy relationships before, but it's one of the most common patterns I see where so many people walk around the world assuming everyone's trying to hurt them, get one over on them, talk behind their back. So everybody just makes all these negative assumptions that also ruins their friendships, their relationships. So in this whole conversation around disconnectedness and studying happiness, what would be your biggest piece of advice for everybody in order to bridge that gap, in order to deepen their relationships so that they can feel more fulfillment and feel more joy from and more replenishment from relationships versus deterioration from relationships?
Yeah, so there are so many different keys to what we know makes people happier and makes people live their happiest life. One of which is relationships. Another one is purpose. I know we're going to get into that. Another one is how we care for our body, and and ensuring that we are truly doing things that bring us joy. And so in terms of your relationships, I think you can look at any of your relationships, and we all have to kind of take inventory and stock. Which of your relationships are draining you, suck the life out of you, and which of your relationships are life-giving, make you, feel more alive, make you feel at peace, really lift you up. And we have to learn how to put boundaries around the ones that really bring us down. I would love it if you could just cut those out, but I know I can't, because most often those are people in our lives that, you might be related to those people or whatnot. And so we do, though, we owe it to ourselves to learn what's our yes and what's our no, and to be able to really put a boundary around that, and still with kindness and compassion for both the other person and yourself, really pay attention to how often that you're spending time with people who suck the energy out of you, and then really look for the people who inspire you. I mean, Jen, you inspire me. It's why I want to, why I reached out to you maybe like 6 months ago to spend more time with you. So look for the people who inspire you and intentionally make the time. You're not going to find more time ever in a day. And so make the time for those people to be in your life, create the structures, whether it's even just once a month, where you are going to get a fill of people who inspire you, who lift you up, who believe in you, because God knows there's enough people who won't.
Yeah, so I always say increase the enhancers and detox the drainers.
Yeah.
There are plenty of enhancers in this world. And the drainers you don't have to be angry at. You don't have to create chaos with. You can just peacefully bow out, distance yourself. There doesn't need to be a fight. There doesn't need to be any blame game going on. It's just you distance yourself from those people, or lower your expectations of the time with them in order to not have it affect you that much. I always say hurt people, happy people don't. So if you're around people that are being destructive, they're probably in a lot of pain. So it behooves all of us in our state of happiness to address those people with compassion and empathy and just keep distance, right? So you do a lot of work with people in finding their purpose, because that's another reason that people feel depressed, because they're disconnected from themselves. They feel lost. They don't have a clear sense of direction and passion about what they're doing. So you help people do this on a regular basis. This is what your podcast is all about. What are some of the key steps that people can do if they're feeling lost or just not as invigorated in their purpose?
Yeah. So number one, a big thing for me is the language that we use around purpose. We are out there and we're like, I got to find my purpose. I got to search for my purpose. I don't know what it is. I'm feeling all lost. And the way that our brain responds to that. So, we know that when something is lost, like if I hand you $100 right now, you're going to be happy. But if you lose that $100 by the end of the night, you're going to be really unhappy. You're going to be more unhappy. So loss hurts. And so this idea, I got to find my purpose, it's like as if it's lost. And so the first thing is that we really want to shift our language. So all of the language around purpose, you were talking about people asking little kids, who's your best friend? Well, my pet peeve is when people ask little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
Our language around purpose equals a job title, or purpose equals a role like being mom or being dad, or purpose is something I'm supposed to find. That's just going to put you into a negative mindset. And in that place, like look at my body language. I'm all tight and you're in fight flight mode and you're all stressed. In that place, you literally cannot find purpose. So the number one thing is we really need to shift our language and out of like the stress mode and move into a place of curiosity and positivity. Because what positivity does on the brain is positivity opens our brain and allows us to build connections that we didn't see before. I mean, literally research studies when someone is like looking at videotapes of puppies and they're all happy, in a brain scan, that person's prefrontal cortex gets all excited, and then that person makes more connections, trusts more, etc. So that's number one, the number one step.
Can I stop you right there for a second? Because one of the things that you said, is stop trying to find. And I always say to people, it's not really what you want to do. It's who do you want to be?
Exactly.
So being your purpose can start with what we talked about earlier, smiling at people that you don't know and just trying to make somebody else happy. It doesn't have to be this radical, drastic thing that I think people feel like it has to be, but these little incremental steps of changing your view of the world and how you operate in it. And for those of you who didn't see what I posted today, this on Instagram and on Facebook about Happy International Women's Day, that quote really kind of embodies exactly what you're saying there, is just be in incremental steps. Instead of having to feel like you lost something and you have to radically find it, just being of purpose and being purposeful in what you're, just being purposeful in how you walk, being purposeful in how you engage with people can change your energy and viewpoint of the world drastically, instantly.
Absolutely. So that is a huge thing with step number one in terms of changing your language, that it's not something that you do. It's not a job title. It's being your true self. It's being who you were born to be, which then leads to step number two, which is, okay, so who am I, right? Because a lot of us, it has been, who we are has been covered up by other people's expectations. Maybe your parents wanted you to be a certain kind of a way, or, you were really excited. One of my clients was super excited about art when she was younger, and her mom did not want to hang her art around the house. And so it like just shut that down for her. Another one of my clients, she also in art saw her whole life those commercials for starving artists. And she was like, I don't want to be starving, and so she just cut that out of her life. Mm-hmm. And if we look, so step number two is getting to know who you are and what brings you joy. And it would seem so simple. So many people say to me, shouldn't I know this already? I'm 40 or I'm 35 or I'm 55. And it's like, no, because we have literally, if you think about the word depression, I think of it as a lot of times what lights you up or what brings you joy has been depressed, right? Because of other people's opinions or other people, what they wanted to do. Like my father was an architect, and he, told all of us, never have your own business. It's too hard, right? So he meant it out of love, but any sort of inkling that we might have had in, of who we might, maybe one of us felt like we were an entrepreneur is like, ooh, don't do that. Right. And so we need to uncover that. Step number 2 is uncovering who you are and remembering. And I like to think of it as remember, right? Your joy. And
So joy is one thing I want to really like hit home for people.
Yes.
Because when we're kids, we're joyful. And Carin, you know this, an exercise I do with my clients early on is go back to your little you. Like, who were you as a kid? Like, I was this hyperactive kid who'd swing from swings and climb on monkey bars and climb trees. And I would jump off from as high as I possibly could. And I'd ride my bike as fast as I could. And I'd find the highest hill that I could possibly ride down. That was who I was. No matter what I was doing it with this daredevil exuberance.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so much of who I am as an adult. Because I've continued to embrace that. Now, there was times in my life that other adults' opinions tried to suppress that, or my peers' opinions tried to suppress that. Now, my daughters were never like that, like never ever like that. They are a lot more calm and they are a lot more focused and diligent, and they're who they are. And I hope they maintain that authenticity of who they are the rest of their lives. But most people lose who they are because they believe that they have to be somebody else. And more importantly, and more sadly, is most people lose that joy that we have as a child, because somebody said life is meant to be so serious. Be serious, everybody.
Right. Be serious. But then you take the kids who are serious and someone is saying to them, get out there. You're taking the introverts and someone's saying to them, stop reading a book and go out. So, I have a client who's so gregarious and colorful, and she loved to do cartwheels for her grandfather. She was like, so kind of like you're describing, gregarious. And I was the same kind of little girl. But her parents were first generation immigrants, and they just wanted her to study and do well by what they thought would, and they meant well by it. Yeah. And so they told her no dancing, no gymnastics. She basically learned no color, and she ended up as a pharmacist. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like a white coat and like literally no color in her life. And she ended up being my pharmacist. And she pulls me behind the counter one day and says, "You're a coach, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'm so unhappy." And we remembered her joy, who she was as a little girl. And I'll tell you now, she's no longer a pharmacist. She's actually an international model and is out there being so colorful on billboards in other countries. Like, because it's, her true nature. And this is what step 2 is all about, is remembering your true nature, what brings you joy, and being that, doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
Which then gets us to step number 3, which is typically when the fear will come up, right? So it's like the fear comes up of, you start remembering, like a client of mine who remembered that, she would always take notes, and really she'd always, when she was little, would have fantasies and dreams about erotica. And she would privately read all this erotica, even though when she was a teenager, right? And so she had this remembering that what brings her joy is reading and writing erotica. Mm-hmm. But she was then 45 and in medical management, and she was terrified, and a mother of 2 was terrified to actually start being herself, right, and doing what she wanted to do. She didn't even want to tell her husband that she had these dreams of writing erotica. And she was ashamed. And so step number 3 is to overcome the fear and the self-doubt, mm-hmm, and those obstacles, mm-hmm, in order to take the first step forward.
Which means you have to change your beliefs as well, because she has certain beliefs around that were programmed by somebody else at some point in her life that made her feel ashamed because it wasn't maybe something that was embraced in her family or in her culture, to be seen as beautiful, but to be seen as something negative. And this is what so many people do. and they can form their beliefs based on the beliefs that other people projected on them through their lifetime. And then those fears can't be disrupted or overcome until you acknowledge where the belief systems were that got you there. Mm-hmm. So for me, I was so afraid of failure. And I didn't realize why I was so afraid of failure until I was about 31 and I had just had my daughters, and I realized my fear of failure was programmed from my dad, who was a Marine. And, you know, there's this mantra in the military, failure is not an option, which I totally get on a battleground. But if you tell a child that, who is really good at self-preservation and can work a system, then that child's going to do everything that they're good at and do nothing that they could possibly fail at. And that's not good at all, because I was playing small to my potential. And so I had to identify where that fear came from to number one, acknowledge it wasn't real. It was programmed by somebody else, and it wasn't even relevant to the world in which I lived in. It was relevant to the world that he lived in during that time period. And then I had to give it a new meaning. And the new meaning I gave it was that I have more fear of regret than I have of failure, because that fear of failure was so debilitating to me that I needed to override it with a different fear. Fear is innate in us, right? It's something that's real. It keeps us alive. Yep. And it goes back into our human evolution. So how you harness fear and the meaning that you give the fears is what can change how you engage with it and flow with it. So for me, I have more fear of regret than I have of failure. And then failure is just part of the process on the journey to success. And that helped me overcome all of my fears.
I love that, Jen. I love how you're talking about flipping it. And that is really absolutely what we need to do in this third step, because like you said, fear is going to be with us for the ride. You know, Liz Gilbert writes in her book, Big Magic, that fear is always going to be there, right? So it's just that fear gets to go in the back seat instead of being in the driver's seat. Yep. And I like to think of it that, you know, fear is really just trying to be your best friend. Mm-hmm. Fear thinks that it is your best friend because as long as you thought you were going to fail, then you were, you know, you would stay small and never displease dad. So fear is like, anytime it would keep you small, it was like, yes, Jen, I'm doing such a good job as your best friend here, you know? Mm-hmm. And so we need to also, so many times people are like, no fear, no fear. No, that doesn't work that way. Right. You know, in order to really move forward toward purpose, it is actually embracing and understanding the fear, like you're saying, and working with it in a whole new way, like you're saying, giving it new meaning in order to be able to take that step forward.
Yeah, and take charge of it and control of it versus have it control you. It's always, how do I choose an empowered perspective versus the victim perspective? How do I take control of this versus give it away? I use that with the diet world all the time. The diet industry is so victim mindset. And it's on purpose because it keeps people in the same cycle. But if you can't have something, then it puts you in this fear of, oh, I can't have it. And then it creates all of this anxiety around wanting it more and also shame. But instead of looking at something like, I can't have it, for me as a sugar addict, eradicated my addiction by looking at it as, I don't want to have it now. I choose not to have sugar now because it makes me exhausted. It makes me tired. Not that I can't have it, but I choose not to have it right now because I choose my energy more. That's so much more empowering of a way of handling any perspective, is how to take charge of it. Say with my children around money, whenever they ask for things that I don't want to spend the money on, I will say to them, I choose not to invest our money in that now. We don't have it, we can't spend it, or I just don't want to spend it, because I never want them to be programmed with a scarcity mindset around money or a victim mindset around money. So instead, I've always programmed, I choose not to spend our money on that now because it's not a priority to me. It is not of value to me. And I love that. So I love
that. One of the things that I learned along the way is I used to always say to myself, I can't do that because, right? So I got married really young out of college. I followed like the perfect life, perfect lawyer husband, perfect house, perfect dog, perfect everything. And yet still cried almost every day. And I was so young. I was 25 years old and had this perfect life. And whenever it would come up to me that I was just so unhappy and that this didn't feel right, I would say, I can't leave the marriage because, right? Or I can't. And I did end up getting divorced at 26 and starting my journey to all of this and happiness and what is happiness and what is happiness for me. And even once I had an inkling that this is the work that I was meant to do in the world, I felt like by then I was making good 6-figure salary, corporate America. I thought, I can't leave. I can't not have health insurance. I can't, right? And so one of my favorite tools is so simple. You can flip, I can't, to how can I?
Yeah. Exactly.
And that has been like, that shifted everything for me because it was like, well, how can I have health insurance? Well, guess what? I don't know what's going to happen with American politics in the future, but right now I can buy my insurance on the marketplace. Or how can what I was able to do is when I went back to school, I reached out to a couple. I eventually did leave my corporate job. And I don't know if you want to get into that story some other time, but what I was able to do is reach out to people who I had known in the marketing world and offer to do some freelance work. So how can I had money coming in while I was in school. And
I just want to talk about that for a second though, because a lot of people that I talk to, and I'm sure you probably find a similar pattern, are people who get these corporate jobs. And I'm not saying every person that works in the corporate world is unhappy, but there are a lot of people that were sold a bill of goods by the parents or teachers that you need to go get a good, secure corporate job, and that's going to be security for you and your family, and you just kind of stay there for as long as possible. And the truth is they're unhappy, but they bought into a belief system that if they got out of that pattern, they would find themselves in this black hole of abyss of just being lost and unsuccessful. Right. And I always joke because entrepreneur, I forget what the number is, but let's say it's like 174 billionaires in the world right now. And every one of them's an entrepreneur. So
what's more secure? But
the whole thing is, and I'm not saying everyone to go out and run out and become an entrepreneur, but I am saying that if you're unhappy where you're at, there's other places to go. And I would imagine the same for you as me. Most people that are coming to me unhappy stage of their life are really unfulfilled because they bought into this belief system. And for a lot of them, they do jump ship of corporate world and go start their own consulting thing. And they're like, wait a second, I'm working less hours and I'm making more money and I'm enjoying my life. Like, this is kind of crazy.
Right, exactly. And it's, we have been taught that, and we taught it, and so we perpetuate it too, right? This idea of just go to college, get a good job, get out, do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll be happy, and then you repeat it. And it's a pattern that, for most people is not working. And what I mean by that isn't that corporate isn't working. It's the mindless, numb zombie, just keep doing, letting life control you that isn't working. And it all comes down to the word choice that you used earlier, choice, right? Anytime it's like, and I remember this so well, like, oh, I have to do this job. I have to stay here. I have to do this. And even just the smallest bit of empowerment is taking that back and just saying, you know what, for right now, I'm choosing this.
Yeah.
Like, I have a client right now who has started her own consulting business while she is still in her corporate job. And she has like 3 years left until she gets her full pension. And so she kept saying, I have to. Well, a simple shift of I choose to for the next 3 years was so empowering. And so I think it is that we've bought into this mindset, and we need more role models. And a lot of I know for me, I had no one who was, I didn't know anyone who was doing what I wanted to do. This is almost 20 years ago. I'd never heard of life coaching. The only motivational speaker I'd ever heard of was Tony Robbins. And the only role model I had of who I really wanted to be was Oprah. Yeah. Well, if I have Oprah and Tony Robbins as the benchmark, no wonder I stayed paralyzed. And it was terrifying because to go from 0 to Tony Robbins feels impossible. Our brains we can't get there. And so I think we stay stuck in that too, because we have an idea and we don't see that there's any path to actually make money doing what we want to do. And so it's so important. And this actually gets me to step 4. I always talk to people that we have to take one small step. And often the first step is saying, who else has done this?
Yeah.
Who can help me? Who else is out there? And find the people. I was talking to a client of mine who really has always wanted to be an author. And first we talked about J.K. Rowling, and it was like, okay, she's awesome. But let's find the people who are like, they're making like a nice salary as an author. Like you can get there, but how about we start a step at a time? So who are the people who have been there, and really creating an action plan where you are taking one small step. And I always believe that we need to start where we are.
Yep.
Even in corporate. Like I have a client who had realized that her dream was really to teach mindfulness. And she was a top 5 executive in a $30 billion real estate company. And so she started teaching mindfulness at 7 a.m. every Wednesday in her company. She started where she is.
Yep.
So the 4th step is really about realizing where are my opportunities and that I can start right now, what do I not yet know, and who can help. And so it's creating that action plan forward.
It's funny. I actually have a lot of friends, clients that were that person too. They started kind of in the bottom of an organization and became the president, vice president, CEO, top position, but they did one step at a time, building on that. And there's nothing more valuable than that experience in that organization or in that field to build you up from wherever it is that you are to where you want to go. And it doesn't have to be a long process. That's the thing. If you're a fast learner, it could be a fast process. I think the biggest thing is being very open and very vocal about wanting to be on a path of progress.
Yes. And making opportunities for yourself. So the event that you and I spoke at, Jen, to bring full circle, that event did not exist until I met a woman at Morgan Stanley. Yeah. And I said to her, hey, you should do a women's empowerment event. And she said to me, you're right, I should. And that was how that event got started. And I think she still does it every quarter, bringing in different speakers.
Yeah.
But I created my own. Listen, I wanted to be out there speaking, so I created my own event. And that I think sometimes we're so stuck in our own minds that it has to look a certain way. We can create our own opportunities. And that's what I love doing. And when I teach people how to live on purpose and go through these 4 steps, it is really about creating that opportunity for yourself to be living your joy.
Yeah. So by the way, I love doing that too. I always do. I create my own stuff and I always call it creating my own bridge. So when I was younger in my entrepreneur life and I felt like every bridge I tried to cross to get to the next place was closed. And there was somebody else like manning the gate that I couldn't get past. And that was the visual that I had. And I was like, I'm just going to build my own bridge. Exactly. And there's no one on the other side who can stop me. And that's what I've always done. That's why I'm always creating new things. Because basically, you could assume safely that when I'm creating something, it's because somebody's kept stopping me on another bridge.
Right. I love that.
Bridge.
I love that. That's totally how I do it. That's so funny. I love it. And I love the verbiage.
So your podcast is going to help people with a lot of this insight and knowledge and dialogue, because this is a dialogue that I feel is a daily dialogue. I don't believe personal development should ever stop. I believe it's every day. And I believe it's every day because we're a different person today than we were yesterday or a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. So even if you said the same thing to me, which I know you wouldn't, but even if you said the same thing to me week after week, I could be hearing it differently week after week. It's kind of like reading a book that you read before, but you read it a year later and it's like a totally different book because you are reading it. I mean, I had to read I think it's called A New Earth. What is it? One of the spiritual books that I read back when I was in my 20s. and it's totally blanking me right now, but I think it's a newer. I had to read 3 times over the course of like a 6-7 year period in order to finally get the book. And the first time I was reading it, I was kind of getting it, but not really. The second time I was like, okay, I'm getting a little bit more. And it wasn't until the third time, because I wasn't the full version of myself that needed to be existing.
You couldn't absorb it. Yeah, exactly. I totally. And sometimes I read things. I was reading a book yesterday that I have read probably 3 times before. It's one of those books I just kind of open to a new page and see what's there. But I've read every page so many times. And I swear that a concept that has not been there the last 4 times was someone wrote it in. It was like, we pick up new things, and it's so important, and it's why we need to be on this path of lifelong learning.
And your podcast is also going to create a community, which I think is really important, because sometimes people don't have the community right in their community. And so the great thing about these virtual communities are they really are real. I mean, they really do provide conversation and dialogue and shared resources. But I also know that you're doing a course on this soon too, right, where people can actually walk through these 4 steps with you, go into a deeper dive through these 4 steps in order to really uncover their purpose or become more confident in the clarity of it. So since they're not finding it, they're just being it more clearly, and they're having more clarity in that navigation. So can you tell us a little bit about that, so that anyone who's interested and they're like, yes, I need this, can access you and this information more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am launching a course called Living on Purpose, and it literally over 4 weeks takes you through each of those 4 steps. So that first week, we are going to dive into shifting that language and shifting how you see purpose, and really understanding who you be, right? So that you can be purpose. And that second week, exercises to really go into your joy and get clear on that joy, and even writing your purpose statement. And the third week, you're going to learn the mindset tools and overcoming that fear and self-doubt. And then the fourth week, I'm going to give you what I call a soul action plan for you to actually take those steps forward. And you can do it self-study, where you go Living on Purpose. The course is at livingonpurposecourse.com, livingonpurposecourse.com, or you could go to purposegirl.com, my website. And you can either do a self-study version where you get the videos delivered to you every week, or starting on Monday, March 12th, there is an optional live version where you get the recorded videos, and then I'm able to take you and the group through deeper coaching, so that I can actually work with you individually on your specific purpose and really motivate you to move forward. So it's really exciting, and there is a community aspect to it, where there's a Facebook group part of it. And I'll tell you, I launched just to kind of see who out there was looking for their purpose. I did a short kind of like we're doing now, a conversation, and it was free and whatnot. And I had 270 people sign up for that. And it just tells me that we are seeking that community. Yeah. And it is why I'm doing the podcast. It's why I'm doing the class. And it's why I have a community of other, purpose women who are out there and really wanting to be living in that other way. And I'm just super excited about it.
Yeah, I agree. People are looking for it and want it as ongoing nourishment. You also do, and I'm being very mindful of your time, but before you go and before we end this, you also do retreats. And I haven't been on any of your retreats yet, but every picture and video I see from it looks like you guys are having so much fun.
So, it's so interesting. There's so much we could have talked about here, but, as I really put my purpose together and why am I here? And I became so clear that I'm here to empower people to live their purpose, and specifically women. I'm a girl's girl. I always have been. When I was a little girl, I was always playing with other little girls. Like, that's just who I was. And, when I looked at what do I want to be when I grow up, like 1 minute I wanted to be an OBGYN, and 1 minute I wanted to be an event planner. And I kind of put all of that together, right? So like I birth women's dreams now. And the event planning is I put on these retreats, and I choose somewhere fabulous that I love to go, and I invite women to join me. And we have a soulful, transformational experience of uncovering your true purpose and your true nature wherever we are. So I just led women on a retreat in Tulum maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was fabulous. And in Tulum, Mexico, there's this whole concept of Zama, which is the dawn of a new day. So what is, each woman walked away with her Zama, her dawn of a new day, while we also, went to visit the ruins, and we had a shamanic ceremony, and we went mermaiding. And in September, I'll be taking women to Greece. So I have not even announced that yet. I'm doing it with a couple of other women's empowerment folks, and we'll be going to the Greek Isles. So, and doing meditation in the Greek Isles and yoga. And so it's really what I've done, and what I hope every single person out there does, is take all of the pieces that they're passionate about and put it together. Purpose is not one job title. It's not being a retreat leader or a coach or a speaker. I see purpose as a verb, and my verb is to inspire and empower people to live their purpose. And I do that in all of these different nouns, as a retreat leader, as a coach, and as a speaker, as a friend, as a stepmom, etc. And so we put that all together, and that's how we can have a holistic, happy life. So I would love it if you're interested in my retreats, go to purposegirl.com, and you always can sign up on my website for free for my newsletter to get information about when I'll be hosting more retreats and when I'll be doing more courses, and to join the community. I have a dream, a vision this year of launching a women's movement. As you know, I've been getting really obsessed with the statistics of women's depression. And my dream is to launch a whole movement where we, just like we have said Me Too and no more to sexual abuse, where we say Me Too and no more to living this depressed, depleted life. And the science is behind us, and community is behind us, and I'm excited for that to come to fruition.
I absolutely love that, which means that would start with breaking a lot of cycles, and awakening a lot of people, and changing curriculum in schools as well, starting kindergarten, and that would be amazing. As a mom of teen girls, I see the pattern of other teen girls clearly comes from their mothers. And whenever I see certain behaviors, doing what I do for a living, it takes so much restraint to not reach out to the mom and be like, can I coach you, please?
Right.
Because what behavior I'm watching play out right now is detrimental, not just to your daughter, but to all the girls that she's subjected to in school. And I'm not angry at that mother as much as I am disappointed in society that these tools still are not taught and accessible in curriculums starting at an early age. And I understand that these people are just repeating cycles, usually repeating cycles of pain, don't have any other tools in their toolbox, and they're not surrounded by people like you and I, and the people that we surround ourselves with, where those conversations of gossiping and bashing people and putting people down are not tolerated, right? So I can tell by the way that some of these girls act that is what their moms are doing on the majority of the time. And the only way to really eradicate that is to hit it from the top down and the bottom up, right? So I'm with you on that whole depression cycle, because, for me, I believe we need to change the conversation. It's not about mental health. It's about emotional wellness.
Yes.
What we're missing. Mental health, to me, mental health signifies there's something wrong in my brain. And that can be possible, but that is only one small percentage of what's going on in the world. The illness is emotional illness, and we need to focus on emotional wellness. The emotional illness can cause your brain to get all crazy and messed up by the stories that you keep telling yourself, but really it's about emotional wellness, not about mental health. And
I love that. I mean, because what's really going on here is that we have a self-loathing issue. And if we can, with emotional wellness, if we can teach kids to love themselves, and I don't mean the fake, arrogant, puffed up self-esteem. I mean compassion when you do fail, and because you will, and kindness toward yourself and others, and connectedness, and that emotional well-being, being able to name your feelings.
Yeah.
Is really important, and something that I know I wasn't taught, and
most aren't.
No, and that's okay. It's not a blame of anybody. It's saying we get to do this now. In fact, I've had so many women actually ask me if I would do a mother-daughter retreat, and I feel like it keeps coming up. So maybe this conversation is.
I'll go with you. We'll do it together. Because that's here for me, and I keep working with so many teenagers that are in a state of depression, and they turn around really quickly. The thing is that I've found the common denominator is they're disconnected from self. They are not taught how to express feelings, emotions. They don't understand nutrition, which is a big part of it, and what nutrition can do to their emotional and mental state, and understanding passion and getting connected to things that they're passionate about. And once you connect them to those 4 key things, as well as other things, but those 4 key things, that within like weeks, their parents are always like, what just happened? Like, how did you just do that? You only talked to them like 3 times. And I'm like, because I'm teaching them how to go forward and teaching them the fundamental skills to go forward, where unfortunately, and not to get on a different tangent, but unfortunately, often the business model around psychology is codependence. We're trying to teach forward motion. Right. Both of us having backgrounds in psychology are saying this, and we're saying we want to also break that cycle too, to foundation fundamental skills to move forward, not codependency to have to keep visiting me each week. And I know you don't want to do that either with people. So that's what we're going to make that a goal. I
love it.
Everyone else listening has to hold us accountable to that goal. Okay. So I love it. Thank you so much, Carin. Girl, everybody can check her out, Purpose Girl. If you want to find out about the course that she's doing, it's starting Monday, so get on. Yep. You can still find that on her website, as well as what was the direct one to the course?
livingonpurposecourse.com.
Yes, livingonpurposecourse.com. Thank you so much, Carin. I love talking to you. As everyone can see, like, I'm so grateful, especially on International Women's Day, to surround myself intentionally by so many amazing women, that we can have these amazing kind of conversations that are productive, supportive, encouraging, solution-driven, and good energy.
I love it. Thanks for having me, Jen. It's been so fun.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and comments. Great seeing everybody. Bye.
Bye.